Conclave, released October 25, 2024. Directed by Edward Berger. Written by Peter Strahan and Robert Harris. Starring Ralph Fiennes, Stanley Tucci, and John Lithgow. Rotten Tomatoes score, 92%. Metacritic, 79. IMDb, 7.6. Welcome back to Real Reviews. Like always, I am your host, Lee. Today we are reviewing Conclave, a movie that I entirely decided to watch based on just the cast and a trailer like a month before. I knew going in that this would be much different than most modern movies. But let's talk about it. So I pointed out the cast, and it delivers. Every single scene is perfectly acted, from facial expressions all the way down to tone of voice. I was pleasantly surprised by Sergio Castellitto, who I had never seen in anything. He is by far the most expressive with his face. He had plenty of scenes where he didn't have lines but the camera focused on him, and he had to convey everything without a word, and he knocks it out of the park. Stanley Tucci is fantastic. Showing a wide range in the movie, he is one of the most emotive characters. Ralph Fiennes is, while by far being the most calm character in the movie, but every single line is delivered with the gravity it deserves. One thing I rarely talk about is the sound design, but it is something that was certainly focused on here. We have scenes where all you hear is someone breathing or crying. They make sure to capture each cough or background noise in these large echo-filled rooms. I wasn't always a fan of the music. Sometimes it felt like it came in a bit too loud and ended up being distracting. But overall, the sound design is something anyone watching it will notice. This movie is also shot beautifully, everything framed and lit so perfectly. Many shots could be used as a screensaver on a computer and no one would bat an eye. There aren't a ton of locations in the movie. They weren't allowed to film in the Vatican, which makes sense. I am not familiar with any of the locations, or if it was just all on a soundstage. If it was on a soundstage, they built gorgeous sets. I think that the very limited number of locations probably helped with filming this pretty quickly. The story is a simple one, but let me hand out a brief warning. If you hold strong conservative ideals, this movie will make you upset if you can't view it outside of that scope. The story is about the process of voting for the next pope, how investigations can happen, how past mistakes can ruin the future. The primary factions for much of the movie are the liberal cardinals and the more conservative cardinals. The movie does nothing to cover up any of the arguments that each side has, and they don't hide how the other characters feel and how they think the viewer should feel about each side. And from that, you can probably guess which side is the bad guy, and you can figure out if you're going to like this part of the movie or not. There aren't really any effects in this movie. There is one scene where an explosion happens and fills the room with dust, and everything else is just lighting, but all of it is done well. This kind of leads into costumes. I will not pretend to be an expert on Catholic cardinal or nun attire, but I thought that they looked great. Especially the cardinals. As part of the movie is that there are over 100 cardinals from around the world at the conclave, and many of them have different headwear, or that they have slightly different designs on their robes that give them a bit of visual flair when looking at the giant rooms of the meeting. The focus on the costumes also leads how after the scene with the explosion, some of the robes still have dust on them. The antagonist of this movie might seem like one of the groups that I mentioned earlier, but it really isn't. The force that they are fighting against is doubt, corruption, ambition, and the fact that sometimes the best person for the job is the person who has no desire for it. While obviously the factions make moves against one another, and there are things that happen behind the scenes, but this only highlights what I mentioned. Obviously, I like this movie, and I would recommend it with the caveats that I mentioned earlier. I gave it a perfect score, and I think it deserves it. I couldn't think of a single thing that I truly disliked about the movie. Like always, if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment for more content like this. I typically have at least 2 videos out per week, real reviews like this or AI reviews depending on releases. Until next time.